diverse audience. So we have young folks out at the back. We also have lots of experienced people right out here. What gives me pleasure is the fact, can we reduce the volume of it? Yeah, thanks. What gives me pleasure is that we have a wonderful range of Indian PSUs and corporations who are doing fantastic work. We had Dr. Sandeep talking about Indian oil and how it's making a contribution and a splash. And honestly speaking, when I was thinking yesterday, what should I be talking in this audience, where we have great Indian corporations already doing fantastic work. One of the facets which struck me is that how do we kind of start thinking about building up a culture? And I think the most important thing which every leader looks upon is, are we having a culture of health and well-being? And in order to do so, how do we prove to our senior management that the culture has been built up? So today, I think, with those thoughts, I just want to have a preliminary discussion on what can be the different aspects, what contribute to the culture, and importantly, within it, how does leadership play an important role? So how can ethical, values-based leadership make a difference in the culture? All of us as senior leaders are looked upon as being the flag bearers for enhancing this. And so this topic is going to be on this aspect. Now, I've just put on this slide, and if I ask all the senior people, so we have Dr. Manjubala as the head out here for ONGC, we have Dr. Kamla, we have Dr. Chandra. What do you think about this slide? Now, this looks like more of a business slide, and it talks about higher earnings per share, lower sickness absence, higher productivity. Is this what leaders or the CEO is looking at? Normally, yes, all of the CEOs want something which is fantastic figures, lesser safety incidents, more satisfaction, higher earnings per share. But the question back to us is, how do we as health and well-being heads make this possible? And I think our role comes on making this through building the right culture of health and well-being. And when we think of the cultural components, it's very important to start thinking on what goes behind each of them. Now, as part of GSK, a large multinational corporation, we are represented in more than 150 countries. We have a significant presence in India. I think this is a question which continuously comes to us. It's never about the numbers. It's always about the people. If we can start thinking more for our employees, this is an outcome of what we will ultimately receive. So for me, I think this might be something which is an outcome and a dream. But let's think of what goes as a process behind each of this. So just a short description of GSK. GSK is globally a pharmaceutical company, one of the leading pharmaceutical companies. We have three primary verticals: pharmaceutical, consumer healthcare, and vaccines. We touch each and every part of the lives of different people all across the world. From a numbers standpoint, we have 7.2 billion units which are consumed across in different forms across the people by the world. Now, as we start thinking about building up the culture, one of the most important things is to get the strategy right. Dr. Sandeep eloquently talked about how we have talked about the Indian oil strategy and we talked about the different components. But if you ask me, the role of a CMO is to also start thinking about how is our population and the demographics. Now, what's very interesting if we see is, each of our organizations will be having people, and the people can be divided into four groups. We have people who are absolutely fine, we have people at risk, we have ill people, and we have long-term disabled. Now, if I draw an analogy, the younger people, less than say 35, are mostly good. The people who are around 35 to 40 are the at-risk people. If they don't start looking after their health, they might go into an ill category. And above 50, if they are not at all looking, then this is where the disabled comes across. So the central part of our strategy is, how do we define our population? What is the population looking across? And then what are the specific aspects which we can do? So ultimately, it's about developing the right business case on health. And if you want thinking about what is the business case, always leaders ask us, Dr. Saab, आप बोलते हैं हम बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं, but then how can we prove that we are really improving? And for this, we need to say, whatever gets measured, gets done. So to all of our CMOs, हमसे पूछा जाता है metrics बताइए कि क्या चीज़ improve हो रही है, कैसे improve हो रही है. And I think these are 4 simple metrics which each of the organizations can look across. I'm just trying to be very simple. I think we do much more beyond, but I just want to make it simple so that we can all be at a common page. Sickness absence, presentism, death, and increase in healthcare premiums. Now, out of all of these 4 metrics, some of them are lagging indicators. When I say lagging, they are reactive indicators. The only leading indicator is presentism. These days, as organizations are getting mature, we are talking less about physical hazards. We talk less about noise, ergonomics. The biggest thing which you asked each of us in the last 2 years has been stress. And I think the last 2 years, during the COVID times, each of us have worked towards resilience and mental stress. Now, in order to make a difference, if this is something which we can show back to the organization that we are improving, that's the area to focus as a CMO. I think this is where we get the right return on investment and the value on investment. So I wanted to touch upon the business case because it's very important on how we as leaders show to the top leader how can we actually make health count. Now, moving forward, it's also important to understand the organization's journey, and when initially every one of the organizations began, it was always about wellness. And now, the transition is happening to well-being. So what is the difference between wellness and well-being? I think the key difference is well-being is now encompassing all the aspects. So it's just not physical, it's mental, it's emotional, and also the social aspect. Dr. Sandeep talked about the CSR activities which encompasses the entire social part, but it is also encompassing the physical, emotional, and mental. I'm sure many of us are familiar with this. What's this hierarchy? Maslow's theory, thank you so much. So absolutely right. And when we start thinking about Maslow's theory, it's really fantastic of how this was built up long time ago, but then it can really make a difference when we start implementing in the organization. Now, the Maslow's theory says that as we progress, we are moving from basic needs to something which might be ultimately a self-actualization. And for us, even in organizations, I think the print is not visible, but it's there. Apologies. So I'll just explain it because it's not so visible. So as organizations move on, we need to start thinking about how we are progressing from wellness and going across into well-being. And here, the basic needs which are there in wellness is related to the physiological needs, the hazards, the safety aspect of it. But I think as we go across, what each of us is also trying to do is not only take care, as Dr. Sandeep said, kindness pays. This is what the CEO has said. It's just not about us, but it is also giving back to the society, thinking of people at large and the families and the dependents. So a very important part of the strategy is how do we kind of ensure that we are having good amount of coverage on all aspects in our strategy. So it's the evolution from wellness to well-being, and I think this is where it entirely connects across to the WHO workplace model. So the theme for today is talking about healthy workplaces, but before we come to the healthy workplace, I wanted to actually connect on how this has all arrived, why it makes sense, how do we convince and influence the management, and ultimately arrive into something which is a healthy workplace model. As we all know, the healthy workplace model has several components. The key is not about the model itself. The key is how we have adapted it for our respective organizations. And what we have done now is we have tried to map all different programs and components into the healthy workplace model. So this is what GSK does. And GSK, we are having components which is into the physical work environment, psychosocial, the enterprise, and the personal health resources. Now we have tried to ensure that we have components all across. I think I've spoken in the past of many of these programs, But I think here today I'm trying to anchor us much more into how do we kind of look at it from a leadership lens. Once we have this entire set of mapping and the resources done, the next question is, how do we operationalize and execute it? I'm not talking about the simple operational matters, but I'm talking from a leadership lens that how do we make leaders start speaking about it and then ensuring that employees are utilizing. We all need to remember that the real value of a health intervention is not in the introduction, it is in the utilization. How many people utilize it, what are the impact figures, and how are we making a difference. If we can improve the utilization, that's what shifts the culture. And I think that's where I'm trying to focus. So it's all about leadership making a difference. We have seen today in Indian Oil, but I know that in the future presentations, we have leadership commitments which are clearly defined. We can make a difference if we have the top management not only saying it, but personally embodying it or actually adopting it. So in one of the photographs, I noticed that the chairman was himself involved in, I think it was a yoga activity or something. And it's like leading from the front. So leaders can start making a difference if they personally believe in it. And it's not that every leader is always a champion. I think it starts with the leader, but ultimately it is to all of us. For us at GSK, I would be sharing on how we are doing this out here. For us, it all starts from the mission itself. And for us, the mission statement says, do more, feel better, live longer. This is our mission statement. The mission statement is already talking about feel better and live longer. So health is an integral part of the mission. If you have it into the mission, into the values, it is then becoming a part of the everyday life. For us, we do it because as a healthcare company, we not only make difference in the lives of people worldwide, but it is also our own employees who are our first customers to start making a difference. And I think if we can do it for our employees, we expect them to give a much more better output, which will ultimately affect the lives of so many people. How do we do it? We are bound by three values: innovation, performance, and trust. I think for us, it's all about making the difference so that we can build the culture. So it's ultimately, if we can start doing, linking it to the mission, the values, it will all come around. This is the CEO, and for us, the CEO fortunately embodies this, just like the Indian Oil chairman and so many other chairmen. She says that we need to do it personally, and we can then make a difference. So our chairman, Emma Womsley, in GSK, personally ensures that in spite of having meetings, she would try to break her day, get into one of our exercise rooms, try to kind of clear her mind out, and then come back and have the meetings. So it's not that if the CEO, one of the most busiest persons, can do it during the entire day, she carves out time for making and taking care of her health. I think we feel that many of us can still do it. Now, I've talked enough of the role of how and what the values talk about, but for leaders, it's about three key components. It's about establishing the environment, supporting the managers, and providing resources. As simple as it. We can talk a lot, but I think this is the three key areas which matter. When we talk about establishing the environment, it's about, are leaders really walking the talk? Are they helping to create the right environment where people can speak on their issues, which will also be mental health, which will also be difficult issues like capital investment aspects? Are they really believing and doing and making a difference? The second thing is, how are they enabling the managers? We always talk about trust, but trust does not come without empowerment. Are managers really empowered to take decisions? That's the key thing. And last is, are we providing resources? So, fortunately in India, we have something which is a 2% CSR kind of a budget, which comes from the profits. But imagine if this was no budget, or there's nothing, are the leaders still willing to actually spend money on people? It's not about welfare. It's now about well-being. The transition needs to start shifting from compliance to productivity and maximization of resources. These days, we talk about human capital as being the key thing. It's not human resource it's human capital, because they are the best resources for any company. And I would also kind of add to it that we expect so much from the leaders, but do all of us have an accountability? To me, I think that's important. We can keep on saying we can have leaders, we have senior presence, but then in an organization to start building up a culture, you need employees and their roles, we need managers, we need champions, we need leaders, and we also have an important role of this team as the chief medical officers who are sitting out here. If all of them work together, the impact will be visible. I've just put up one slide on the impact which we are trying to produce out here. So in the terms of sheer numbers, represented in more than 130 countries, these are our services which are being utilized. We have more than 10,000 participants in our resilience programs, which are flagship 2.5-day programs. We also have the survey, which is our own customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction survey on health and well-being, which is showing a 84.5% favorable response. We have the different programs which are translated into different languages to improve the utilization. And we also have 1,300 global champions. Now, ask any health and well-being team member, I see Rajat sitting out here, he would say, give me more resources and I'd like to do more. But that's not how it works. We need to start thinking of ambassadors, we need to start thinking of champions. And we realize that we need to make the optimal use of resources. It's all about how do you develop brand ambassadors and make it possible. We also have something called as Workplace, which is an official part or official version of Facebook. People can speak to each other over Workplace, and we have 10,000 employees into the health and well-being Workplace group, which is by far one of the largest groups which we have over Workplace. So internally we use mechanisms on being digitally savvy. We have our apps, we have our own kind of healthcare ecosystem. We have groups where millennials speak across to people who might have been much more senior, and all of this conversation happens out here. For us, health is not driven just by the leaders, it is driven by what people have to say. For us, it's never about compliance, but more about what is the expectation and the feedback of the people. And I think all of this makes this really useful, and people are actually now giving us the feedback of what we should be doing. We have moved digital long back. We have apps which were really well used during the COVID times. I think I'll not talk much about that, but what I want to stress out here is, what we see here is engagement, but engagement only comes when you get the processes right. So the key message with which I would like to kind of land upon is that if we want to embed and build a culture, we need to be very thoughtful, very meticulous, and we need to have the collaboration of everyone. It can only come across when we have all the components right. Communications, really important. Facilitators, champions, workplace group. What you would be seeing very interesting out here, and I don't know whether you have spotted it, I haven't mentioned the health and well-being team, the chief medical officers, the medical officers, because for us, this is much more powerful. These are people who are employed, these are people who are again employed, we have leaders, we have normal people. I think health is not the responsibility only of the health and well-being folks. The responsibility of health, life safety lies with everyone. That's how we are trying to shift the culture. That's how we are trying to ensure that people start understanding that it's all about themselves. It's not about me making a difference, because until and unless people start thinking about themselves, it's short-term, it's not sustainable. So, what's the message for us? I think we need to go very focused. We need to personalize. We need to use data. We need to ensure that we are building up very specific kind of mental health approaches, where the key thing is about utilization. The key thing is not about introduction, it is about utilization. I'm sure that all of you would say that, okay, fine, GSK is a big organization, so are many multinationals. Can you just say what are 3 or 5 important things which if I want to start an organization, can be doing? So I was yesterday reading an interesting article, and this was from a group called Hero.org, and nothing to do with Hero Motorpump for now. But they actually gave good recommendation. I don't know why it's not visible out here. But they actually divided this entire leadership culture journey into 5 components. It talked about what is the role of leadership, what is the role of communication, and the good part was it talks about the different items which can be done. So I'm happy to share this later on, but since it's not visible. But the key thing out here is it talks about many practices which we can adopt. I'll be honest to say that we have not adopted all of the things which are written out here, but it's a wonderful repertoire. If anyone is interested to kind of enhance, move the journey up first, this is excellent. The third thing they have talked about is supportive environment, and they have also talked about policies as well as role of community on doing it. So my apologies because it's not visible, but I think what I... Oh, all right. So I think it talks about the entire components of how it can look in practice. It also talks about how do we need to do it. I loved it because it actually shows that each of us can do it. If we start adopting even few things which are written out here, it's going to make a difference. So with that, I want to conclude by saying that it's ultimately about collaboration. Leaders lead from the front, but we all have a role to play. If we all collaborate, we are going to have success, we are going to have lots of motivation and teamwork. The future will definitely look bright. This is what the management can see if we all get it right. And each of us has a role to play. Thank you so much.